A cyclist is dead after she was struck by the driver of a large commercial truck in Yorkville. We'll hear from witnesses and residents who have concerns.
And sentencing for former fashion tycoon Peter Nygard's defense team makes a case for a shorter sentence.
And Loblaws and George Weston Limited agree to pay up in order to settle their bread price fixing lawsuit. We'll have a reaction to that coming up tonight.
And welcome to Taylor Ronto, right? Don't leave me hanging, Lena. Come on now. Swifties are going to be able to shake it off on Taylor Swift's Way this fall in Toronto.
You're watching Live at 5.
Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Welcome to Live at 5. Cyclists in the city say it's feeling more and more unsafe to bike in Toronto after a 24-year-old woman was struck and killed on Bloor Street today.
Now, this is where CP24 Steve Ryan is live with the latest. This is near Avenue Road. Steve.
Yeah, Bakari, Lena, this fatality happened, according to Toronto Police, just after 8:30 this morning. Bloor Street, east of Avenue Road. Bloor Street is one lane each way, east and west, and there's a designated bike lane on each side of the road, and it's protected by these concrete barriers. Now, according to people that I spoke with earlier today, and according to the police and the evidence that was on the scene that I saw myself, the cyclist was traveling westbound, and she was driving or riding a bike share, one of the bikes that you rent from the city of Toronto. She merged into a live lane of traffic, and within 60 feet of being inside of that lane, she and a dump truck collided, and she died here at the scene. Now, as part of the investigation, the police have to put together the sequence of events, and they need to recreate the entire scene. Part of that scene was a big garbage dump that was blocking the westbound bike lane just west of where the collision happened. So common sense would suggest that this woman, and it'll be part of the investigation, of course, but common sense would say that she merged into a live lane of traffic because she had no other way to get around that dumpster other than get off of her bike and walk on the sidewalk. So the police will now recreate this scene and make a determination as to what's her fault. Did this woman merge into traffic unsafely, or was there something that the driver of the dump truck did? What was his sight line like? What was the truck like itself? Was there any mechanical malfunction? They'll talk to witnesses, video surveillance, and put this back together and try to recreate what led up to the collision happening. But I can't tell you that that dumpster blocking the bike lane will be part of the investigation. I'm certainly not suggesting that that was responsible for the collision, but when you put the sequence of events back together with any investigation, whether it's a fatality or a homicide, you recreate the entire scene, and that certainly is going to play a big part of this scene. Now, we did speak with residents throughout the day, many of them cyclists themselves, and got reaction. Here was some of that.
I'm horrified at the news. I heard about it through a friend of mine. I was in the area and I saw the road blocked. I thought it was just for construction. I saw a cop car and the dump truck and I thought, oh, construction, road closure. And then I was getting a coffee and I got a message from a friend who had come across the incident after the lady was put into the ambulance. And, you know, he knows I bike. He knows I live around here, and he messaged me to see if I was okay. And I was, thankfully. And then I read the news story and heard about it. And yeah, I just thought I'd walk down the street and I noticed that the obstruction has now been moved, which shouldn't have been there in the first place. And it's something I see a lot living here.
The dumpster itself was placed just in front of where that parked black vehicle is right now. And again, it was in the bike lane itself. And within about 4 hours after this collision happening, a construction company removed the dumpster altogether. So it's now clear. I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, just so tragic. Steve Ryan reporting live from Yorkville tonight. Thank you, Steve. Police have identified 2 people killed in a quadruple shooting in Scarborough. It happened early yesterday morning.
22-year-old Braden McCann, you can see him in this photo, and 23-year-old Sarah Prier. They are both from Toronto. They died after being shot in what police describe as a gun battle in a plaza near Ellesmere and Midland. 2 other people were wounded in the shooting. They're still in the hospital with serious injuries, and they are expected to survive. No suspect information has been released. Police want to speak to anyone who witnessed the shooting.
Well, the lawyer for Peter Nygard is asking for a 6-year sentence for the former fashion mogul convicted of multiple counts of sexual assaults.
Yeah, CP24's Beatrice Vaisman has been following this case and continues our coverage. Beatrice.
Bakari and Lena will find out a week from tomorrow on August 2nd, 10 o'clock. Justice Goldstein will deliver his sentence. For now, the convicted sex offender Peter Nygard, who at the height of his career was a fashion mogul, he was a tycoon, he was the head of a multi-million-dollar company. And now yesterday, he spent his 83rd birthday listening to the first day of sentencing submissions. Here are court sketches from inside that courtroom. You can see Mr. Nygard at the bottom left of your screen, a black puffy coat, a hood up over his head, a surgical mask covering his face, and he didn't say anything except for 2 words over the course of these sentencing submissions. Today, the judge simply said, Mr. Nygard, it is practice that the offender has an opportunity to address the court before a sentence is delivered. So today, Justice Goldstein said, Mr. Nygard, is there anything you wish to say? And he simply said, no, sir. And he will have another opportunity in the event that he changes his mind to speak before the judge hands down his sentence next Friday. As for what the two sides are asking for, they're quite far apart. The Crown yesterday asked for a 15-year sentence to be imposed on Mr. Nygard. Today, his defense lawyer said that she's asking for a 6-year sentence to be imposed on Mr. Nygard. She initially started at 8.5, but said even that would be too harsh of a sentence for someone of his age and of his frail condition as well. He's experiencing a number of medical conditions. And we heard the Crown today attack just that too, saying medical has been the mantra to cause delay after delay after delay. Now 7 months since Mr. Nygard was actually convicted in November, found guilty of 4 counts of sexual assault. And so the Crown saying medical has been his mantra, and yet we've not heard from a single medical doctor. The defense also asking for Mr. Nygard to get 1.5 years, 1.5 days times 1 for credit. He's already spent over 1,000 days in pretrial custody or in custody since he was arrested. The Crown is asking for a 1-to-1 ratio. We talked to criminal defense lawyer Kim Schofield about that discrepancy. Listen.
Statutorily, trial custody is given enhanced credit because the theory goes is that you don't have access to rehabilitation programs and any potential parole. So 1 day is actually worth more than 1 day. So that is a statutory eligibility. So in the statute, the criminal code says you are eligible for the 1.5 days. If you want anything more than that, you can apply to the court for enhanced credit. But he will be entitled, most likely, to the 1.5 days for every day already served.
Also interesting to point out, the Crown has asked for restitution for Mr. Nygard's victims who talked about just the profound impact these sexual assaults have had on their lives. A lot of people will be watching about whether the judge includes restitution or cash for therapy for these victims. When you look at the 2 sentences at face value, the 2 asks, the Crown's ask after credit for time already served, it would be around 12 years behind bars remaining for Mr. Nygard. For the defense's ask with credit for time served, that would leave him with less than 2 years remaining behind bars. The defense also asking that Mr. Nygard remain in provincial jail at the Toronto South Detention Centre, where he's been held since his arrest, instead of being moved to a federal facility. So again, all eyes now, Friday, August 2nd, 10 a.m. We'll learn Peter Nygard's fate.
Okay, CP24's Beatrice Vaisman. Thank you. An Ajax dentist has been charged with sexually assaulting a patient. On Saturday, July 13th, the patient attended Casey Dental on Roslyn Road East. Durham police say during 2 of her appointments, she was touched inappropriately. 36-year-old Dr. Sunil Kumar Patel has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault. And police say that Patel also works at Family Smile Dentistry on Lawrence Avenue in Scarborough. They're concerned that there may be more victims, so anyone with information, you're asked to contact them.
An update from Durham Police is shedding more light on what happened prior to a deadly wrong-way crash on the 401 back in April. The new information came during a Durham Police Board meeting on the status of current police watchdog investigations. It confirms an off-duty police officer tried to intervene in a robbery at an LCBO in Bowmanville when the suspect pulled a knife and fled in a U-Haul van. The update also says officers lost sight of the U-Haul for a brief time before the suspect vehicle vehicle struck a cruiser and entered the 401 heading the wrong way. Officers pursued the suspect onto the highway, also going the opposite direction. Minutes later, the suspect and 3 others were killed in the fiery collision.
Well, life-threatening injuries in a collision in the northwest end of the city. Chopper 24 was over the scene. This is at Stills Avenue and Steinway Boulevard, just east of the 427. The crash involved 3 vehicles. It happened around 3:30 this afternoon. Police say a man in his 30s was taken to hospital with critical injuries. Stills is closed both ways in the area as police continue their investigation.
4 vehicles were struck on Highway 400 when a wheel flew off a car. It happened at Highway 400 and Highway 88 in Innisfil this morning. OPP say there were no injuries. Photos show the front driver's side of a red sedan missing a wheel, a truck with major front end damage, and another vehicle with a wheel nut embedded in the windshield. Police say to check wheel nuts regularly.
With that, it's 5:10, 24 degrees. Let's get a check on the roads with Adjo NCA Yabwa.
Busy afternoon, Bakari, and brand new problems through Mississauga now. So on the eastbound lanes of the 403, this is right at Mavis. Vehicle into the ditch. So we do have tow. It looks like it's hooking up the vehicle. Hasn't done it yet, but it is the 2 right lanes that are blocked through here. So definitely creating a delay. This one happened about 10 minutes ago. So at this point, the delay not too bad. If it persists, it's going to get a little bit worse. Also problems if you're trying to get into the downtown core. This is the eastbound lanes of the Gardner on the approach to Jameson. Long-standing stalled truck off to the side. Toronto Transportation arrived on scene and they decided to block the right lane. So that's backed up as you make your way from well before the South Kingsway. And checking out your drive on the 401. We had some problems. They just cleared westbound 401 in the Express approaching Dixie. Was a collision. It did have the right lane occupied. Keep the good news rolling if you're headed on the 410 northbound. Just at Sandalwood, it was at one point 2 right lanes blocked with some sand cleanup. Sand's been cleaned up, so the drive is moving a whole lot better.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
5:12, 24 degrees. You're watching Live at 5, a live shot from inside council chambers coming up. Toronto City councillors, they're discussing how to deal with flooding after a historic flood earlier this month. Stay with us.
Okay, so this is day 2 of the last meeting before city councilors break for the summer.
Let's go live to CP24's Lindsay Biscaya inside council chambers. Councillor Michael Thompson speaking now. Lindsay, what's being discussed?
Yeah, so at this time, Lena and Bakari, the discussion remains flood mitigation and reducing runoff. Obviously, this comes after some tricky weeks in Toronto with some extreme heavy rainfall, record-breaking rainfall that came on quickly and really heavy and caused a lot of flooding in the city, both on the roads and in people's basements. Obviously, quite a time for the city. And so that's one of the main discussions that's happening today here at City Council. Mayor Olivia Chow and and Councillor Jennifer McKelvey have asked city staff to look at ways to try to mitigate flooding and report back by the end of the year. So the discussion really today is around different solutions to try to mitigate that problem. Obviously, there's a lot of concrete in Toronto, so they're looking at ways to have some kind of runoff so that the rain can actually soak into the ground and absorb, and therefore you won't get as much flooding. But obviously that discussion will have to continue. We know that Mayor Olivia Chow has also said she wants the city to explore a stormwater charge, which some have dubbed a rain tax, but that would really be for a lot of industrial and commercial businesses that have a lot of concrete around their buildings, not for homeowners. So that's one idea. There's also been talk about having a bridge in parts of the DVP that are built onto a natural floodplain to try to alleviate flooding there. That was one of the big spots we saw some flooding. So a lot of discussions. Obviously, it's Toronto City Hall, so there's also a discussion about funding. We know Councillor Francis Nunziata has been asking time and time again, can the provincial government not chip in with some funding to help us deal with this issue? Also the federal government. So there's a lot of ideas on the table, but again, we're going to have to wait and see what city staff comes back with at the end of the year. If this motion is passed today, a vote is going to be happening at some point this afternoon. So that's one of the big topics of discussion that's happening today. Another big one that happened today, another real talker, is renaming the route between Rogers Centre and Nathan Phillips Square to Taylor Swift Way temporarily when Taylor Swift is in town later this year in November for her 6 concerts. Every single councillor voted yes for that except Councillor Josh Matlow. And we did hear from Councillor Jennifer McKelvey earlier today about why she feels this is kind of a good idea. Have a listen.
We know that Taylor Swift will make a significant cultural and economic impact in every city that she tours, so it's important that we give her a warm welcome. And the motion also asks the general manager to report back on the Swiftonomics of the event, including the tax revenues that are generated to the municipal, provincial, and federal governments. And I think that's something we've all been involved in, is trying to get a fair deal for Toronto in importing the inequities that we have in our tax system.
To be fair, Lena and Bakari, we did actually catch up with Councillor Josh Matlow to ask him why he decided to vote against this. He says he's not against Taylor Swift. He is a Swiftie, but he just feels that maybe the city should be focusing on bigger, more important issues rather than renaming a route temporarily. So once again, the city council meeting continues. It is the last one before the summer break, and we'll keep you posted on what the vote is here when it comes to flooding and mitigating flooding in the city. Back to you.
All right, Lindsay Biscaya, live at City Hall. Thank you, Lindsay. New data shows Ontario has fewer nurses per capita than last year.
Numbers from the Canadian Institute for Health Information shows there are 651 registered nurses per 100,000 people in Ontario. This is the lowest in the country and a drop from 661 last year. The president of the Ontario Nurses Association says that the province needs to hire more than 25,000 RNs just to catch up to the national average.
And a new poll finds a majority of Ontarians want to see a solution to the opioid crisis focused on healthcare and social service. 8 in 10 respondents to the survey from the Canadian Mental Health Association prefer supportive measures to treat opioid addiction and recovery rather than punishment through the criminal justice system. 75% are concerned the opioid crisis is getting worse, while more than half say addiction is an issue in their community. 64% express empathy for those affected by an opioid addiction, while 7 in 10 believe governments should prioritize addressing the crisis. And the CEO of the Canadian Mental Health Association, Cam H., joined us live with more on these findings.
We've come a long way in the mental health and addiction sector at reducing stigma, but it also says that people now understand a little bit more about how individuals become addicted, or they may know someone who is addicted and there may be an experience that they associate with and they can relate to the experience in a way that makes them much more empathetic. And so there are pluses and minuses there. The unfortunate side is we're seeing very high numbers and very high death tolls.
64% express empathy for those affected by an opioid addiction, while 7 in 10 believe governments, as we just noted, should prioritize addressing the crisis.
It's 5:19, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5. Up to 50% of the tourist town of Jasper may be lost following an out-of-control wildfire. We're going to have the latest on the damage next. Alberta fire crews are on high alert as an out-of-control wildfire hit the historic town of Jasper.
Fanned by strong winds, the fire became a wall of flames that crews simply could not contain. Large sections of the town were burned to the ground, and trees and cars were scorched. Premier Danielle Smith estimates 30 to 50% of Jasper has been destroyed. Park Canada officials say they cannot provide a timeline at this moment for crews to be able to assess and report back the extent of damage in the city. And Premier Smith was also emotional when talking about the damage these fires have caused.
They took our parents, who then took us to this special spot that they'd spent time in as children. And now we take our own kids and our own loved ones and visitors from around the world to feel that same feeling that you get with your first glimpse of the mountains on the horizon. A feeling that even though you've just left home, you're coming home.
And the Calgary Emergency Management Agency spoke on its efforts to support Jasper amid a growing wildfire.
It depends a little bit on the different road conditions. The way a lot of folks had to evacuate, they had to evacuate west, which actually brought them down into Kamloops, which ironically made Calgary one of the closer centers in the immediate hours following the event. But we do remain in constant contact with our partners across the province to make sure that we're all coordinated, we're all providing this relatively the same level of service and supporting each other as we work to support the citizens from Jasper.
And Jasper evacuee Bob Covey, who is now staying in BC, joined Your Morning to talk about the destruction caused by the wildfires and being forced from his home.
We were given about 90 minutes notice, and the evacuation was ordered at approximately 10 p.m. Jasper time. So we were thinking, get the family safe, collect as many important things as we could, and head to safety. We thought we would be able to return. You know, we were hoping for the best, obviously. And then when weather conditions didn't cooperate in the last few 24 hours or so, we have all been in shock and watching in horror.
Ontario is sending more than 170 fire management personnel and 2 helicopters to help battle wildfires in Alberta. Earlier today, Premier Doug Ford pledged to support to help the province, saying that Ontario will be there with Alberta as the province rebuilds.
524, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Well, coming up, Canada's women's soccer team, they've won their opening match at the Olympic Games.
Welcome back. The Canadian women's soccer team won their opening match at the Olympic Games.
Yeah, Canada went down 1-0. This was early, but they rallied back to tie the game at 1-1. This was at halftime. Then in the 79th minute, Eveline Vienne took a long ball from Jessie Fleming and slotted it inside the far post. That would be the winner in a 2-1 victory for the defending gold medal champions. Canada played the opener without coach Bev Priestman. She stepped away for the match after accusations that a drone was used to record the New Zealand team during practice.
I think it must have some effect on the players. Unfortunately, it's a distraction that they are being forced to deal with. I think we may have seen some evidence of that, of something weighing on the team. As I mentioned in that first half, they just weren't clicking like they usually do, especially against a team like New Zealand, where they dominated possession but weren't able to connect on those passes.
Well done, ladies. Go Team Canada. Canada's next game is Sunday, this time against France.
Right now it's 5:28, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5. A 24-year-old woman is dead after being hit and killed by a dump truck while biking along Bloor near Avenue Road. It's raising concerns about how safe is it to bike in Toronto. We'll continue our coverage next. A cyclist is dead after she was hit by the driver of a large commercial truck in Yorkville. We're going to hear from cyclists in Toronto who have concerns.
A judge will hand down his sentence in the Peter Nygard sex assault case next week. We'll tell you what the defense is asking for tonight.
And Loblaws, George Weston Limited, agreed to pay up in order to settle their bread price-fixing lawsuit. We're going to have reaction straight ahead.
And welcome to Taylor-Ronto. Swifties will be able to shake it off on Taylor Swift Way this fall in Toronto. We'll explain coming up.
This is Live at 5.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latifat.
I'm Bakari Savage. Police have identified 2 people killed in a quadruple shooting in Scarborough early yesterday morning.
22-year-old Braden McCann, seen in this photo, and 23-year-old Sarah Prehe, both from Toronto, died after being shot in what police are describing as a gun battle in a plaza near Ellesmere and Midland.
Now, 2 other people were wounded in the shooting. They're still in hospital with serious injuries, but they are expected to survive. No suspect information has been released. Police want to talk to anyone who witnessed the shooting.
And police are investigating a stabbing in North York this afternoon. It happened just before 4:30 near Jane Street and York Woods Gate. That's just south of Finch Avenue. Police say a man in his 60s was taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The suspect, described as a man in his 20s, 5'5" with long curly hair. He was last seen wearing dark clothing. Anybody with information is asked to come forward.
Well, cyclists in the city say that it's feeling more and more unsafe to bike in Toronto. This is after a 24-year-old woman was hit and killed. This happened on Bloor Street today.
Let's go live to CP24. Steve Ryan, who's at the scene near Avenue Road, and you've been listening to those concerns, Steve. What are you hearing?
Well, people are very concerned about the state of the bike lanes. Many have complained to me today about the lanes being blocked by construction equipment and by other vehicles. And they said that it's getting to the point where it's not safe to ride a bike in the downtown core. So we're talking about a fatality that happened at 8:35 this morning, according to the Toronto Police here on Bloor Street West, east of Avenue Road. It's one lane east to one lane west for traffic, and there is a designated bike lane on both sides of the street, and those bike lanes are protected by those concrete parking blocks that we see oftentimes in the in the malls, in the parking lots. According to people that I spoke with this morning, this woman was riding on one of the rideshare bikes here in the city, and she merged from the westbound bike lane into a live lane of traffic just behind me here, where you're looking at the gap where there's no barriers. She did so, according to people that I spoke with, and common sense would confirm this, because the bike lane just ahead in the westbound side of the street was blocked with a large garbage dumpster. A construction crew was doing some work in the area here, and you can see as we show you the shot, the westbound bike lane now is clear of that big dumpster. It was removed roughly 4 or 5 hours after the collision happened. So the police will now make a determination at some point in time with regards to what happened, what caused this collision. Was it driver error? Was it a mechanical malfunction on that dump truck? What were the driver's sight lines like? When this woman merged into a live lane of traffic, did she do so safely? It'll all be part of the investigation, but as they attempt to recreate the scene, they certainly will put everything back into place on this roadway here, which will include that dumpster that was blocking the bike lane itself. I'm certainly not suggesting that the dumpster was responsible for the accident, but it is part of the synopsis, if you will, when it comes to putting this thing back together. Common sense, again, will suggest, as with witnesses that I spoke with today, would suggest that this woman had to merge into traffic safely, of course, because she could not continue westbound without getting off her bike and going onto the sidewalk or going out into a live lane of traffic. Now, I did speak with a spokesperson for Cycle Toronto, who was here on the scene earlier on today, and here are some of his thoughts. Let's listen.
This stretch of Bloor has seen a lot of change and a lot of really positive change. This bike lane itself, I think, has really helped to make it a safer street. But, you know, like any system, like any chain, it's only as strong as its weakest link. And if we're not prioritizing keeping these bike lanes safe and clear, and that includes construction zone management, then things like this happen.
Yeah, it really does show an example as to how important it is to keep these bike lanes free and clear, because when you've got cyclists merging into live lanes of traffic, especially when it's one lane each way and they're competing with very large vehicles like a dump truck, there is no room for error. I'll set it back to the desk.
All right, Steve Ryan reporting live from Yorkville tonight. Thank you, Steve. And in relation to this tragic incident, the City of Toronto has released a statement, and part of that says, while it's not clear what the investigation will find, the city is reminding residents and businesses of the importance of keeping bike lanes clear of any obstacles.
Well, life-threatening injuries in a collision in the northwest end of the city.
Chopper 24 was over the scene at Steeles Avenue and Steinway Boulevard. That's just east of the 427. The crash involved 3 vehicles, and it happened around 3:30. Police say a man in his 30s was taken to hospital with critical injuries. Steeles, we should note, is closed both ways in the area as police continue their investigation.
Okay, it's 5:35, 24 degrees. So let's get a check on the roads with traffic specialist Adjoa Intia Yabwa. Adj, any update with that situation in the roads around Steeles?
Yeah, it's still closed. There's no estimated time of when they're going to reopen that intersection. But what I can tell you to avoid Steeles through that stretch, I did take a look at Highway 7 in the area, as well as if you were making your way south towards Finch. Good alternatives, because it looks like this cleanup is going to be there for the next little bit. That's at the intersection of Steeles and Steinway, which is west of Highway 27. I'm going to show you my cameras now, where we do have a bit of a problem. Not really slowing down the drive, but worth a mention. This is on the northbound lanes of the 400, right through Shepherd. Stalled transit transport off to the side, but MTO crews are just blocking that right lane as a precaution. Southbound slows as you make your way from Finch down to the 401. And if you're on the 401, continues to be a busy afternoon across the top of the city. And I can leave you with some good news. We had problems where a vehicle went into the ditch. This was on the eastbound 403 at Mavis. It was the two right lanes that were blocked. They quickly got the vehicle out, so the drive is looking a whole lot sweeter. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Aj, thanks so much for this. The lawyer for Peter Nygard is asking for a 6-year sentence for the former fashion mogul convicted of multiple counts of sexual assault.
Okay, for the very latest, let's turn to CP24's Beatrice Vaisman. B.
Bakari and Lena, for a man who once lived a very glamorous life, Peter Nygard spent his 83rd birthday yesterday in court listening to the first day of submissions for his sentencing. Today was the second day, wrapped up around 12:30 or so, and it ended with the defense lawyer making an appeal to Justice Goldstein, asking for a 6-year sentence for her client. She argued that even 8.5 years, what she initially proposed, would cause unduly harm on her client, that it would be too harsh, that it would be so punitive for a man who's 83 years old, extremely frail, she says, and has a long laundry list of medical conditions. You see Mr. Nygard there at the bottom left of your screen. That's what he looked like the past couple of days in court. A black puffy winter coat, a hood over his head, a surgical mask covering his face. He really didn't say much. He was asked a couple of questions by the judge and his lawyer throughout the last couple of days, answering with almost a whisper yesterday, just responding that he was okay for the proceedings to continue without a break. Today, the judge said, Mr. Nygard, this is your opportunity to address the court. It's something that's granted to every offender before a sentence is handed down. So is there anything you'd like to say? And Mr. Nygard simply replying with 2 words, saying, no, sir. His lawyer saying that because of Mr. Nygard's advanced age and his frail condition, that anything beyond a 6-year sentence would be too harsh for him. And so we heard yesterday the Crown attorneys are asking for a 15-year sentence, more than double what the defense asked for. The Crown saying that would be a fair sentence for a man who they called a predator, who used his status, his fame, his money to lure women into his headquarters of 1 Niagara Street here in downtown Toronto to sexually assault them. These women talking about the profound impact that these sexual assaults have had on them for their lives. These assaults ranging from the late 1980s to 2005. And in the Crown's submissions, Crown attorney Neville Gowalla asked for restitution, cash for therapy for these women because of the profound impacts of these sexual assaults. I asked a criminal defense lawyer what she thinks about this, restitution being included potentially in the judge's sentence. And here's what she said.
The judge can make a restitution order, but the fact that the judge is asking, or rather the Crown is asking for restitution for therapy, that is very rare. Generally, we see restitution like loss of property or reasonable expenses like the cost of moving or loss of a job. So that restitution order has to be readily ascertainable. And if there's any dispute, then that becomes a civil matter. And that's what I understand the defense is arguing.
Lydia Rivas saying a lot of lawyers will be watching that element of the sentencing very, very closely to see what Justice Goldstein decides. If you look at the 2 sentencing asks, Lena and Bakari, on face value, the Crown asking for 15 years minus credit for time served. That would leave around 12 years behind bars. The defense asking for 6 years with credit for time served would leave just under 2 years behind bars. Justice Goldstein set to deliver his sentence 1 week from tomorrow. So next Friday, August 2nd, 10 a.m., we will learn Peter Nygard's fate. Back to you.
August 2nd. Okay. Beatrice Vaisman live in the newsroom tonight. Thank you, Beatrice. Overall crime in Canada was up last year, while the violent crime rate was virtually unchanged.
Yeah. Statistics Canada has released its crime numbers for 2023, and it found that the volume and severity of crime increased for the 3rd straight year. Nonviolent offenses, including property and drug crimes, were up 3%. A significant contributor to the increase was a higher rate of child pornography offenses. Fraud, shoplifting, and auto theft, they were also higher. And compared to 2022, last year saw a 14% drop in homicides and a 10% drop in child sex offenses. Extortion was up 35%. There were also more robberies and assaults with a weapon.
541, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5. Coming up, Toronto City councillors, they're discussing how to deal with flooding after a historic flood earlier this month. We'll take you live inside council chambers. Stay with us.
It's day 2 of the last meeting before city councilors break for the summer.
Let's go live to CP24's Lindsay Biscaya, who's inside council chambers, and they've been talking about the flooding we've experienced in the city. Lindsay, what's going on?
Yeah, we just stepped out so we could do this hit Lina and Bakari, but we've been listening in because what is happening here is that Mayor Olivia Chow and Councillor Jennifer McKelvey put forward a motion today to get city staff to look into different ways that we can mitigate the flooding that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. That, you know, intense rainfall, record-breaking rainfall led to a lot of flooding in our city, as I'm sure our viewers are aware at this point. But I think most people are aware that this is going to be a continuous thing. We're seeing more intense storms more often, and so something has to be done to try to mitigate the flooding. So the mayor and Councillor McKelvey want city staff to come back with a report by the end of the year to look at ways to mitigate flooding and reduce water runoff. And that motion has carried, so it looks like that will go ahead. But the conversation was really interesting to listen into, with a lot of different councillors weighing in, asking questions about what can be done. We did speak with Councillor Jennifer McKelvey about one project that is already underway in the city when it comes to trying to reduce flooding, because of course a lot of different parts of Toronto, including parts of the DVP, are built on natural floodplains, so it is going to happen, but how can we address it? And we did hear from Councillor McKelvey about that one project, which is still going to take about 10 to 15 years to complete, but here's more from her.
So we have an extensive wet weather flow program in the City of Toronto. So there are programs that are about basements, but the program that I was referring to is the Coxwell Tunnel Bypass. So we are building a huge underground tunnel in the City of Toronto, 22 kilometers long, that will hold rainwater until it can be treated in a treatment plant and then discharged into Lake Ontario. It is an enormous project, a huge scale, and it's well underway, but it is still many years in coming, and that's why the motion that the mayor has today is very important, looking at what else we can do right now.
And so Councillor McKelvey also acknowledging that a lot of Toronto is paved over, and we need, you know, soil, grass for rain to be able to soak into so that it doesn't pool up and really start flooding. It needs somewhere to go, and so that's some of the key points, I guess, that City Council were talking about today, and that City staff will be looking at for the rest of this year and then reporting back at the end of the year. A lot of different things to talk about on day 2 of City Council meeting. Another one that was voted on today, which is pretty grabby headline, is the fact that City Council will be renaming a route in Toronto from Nathan Phillips Square to the Rogers Centre, renaming it Taylor Swift Way temporarily for when Taylor Swift is in town in November for her 6 concerts. So this was actually voted on. Every single councillor voted yes for this, except Councillor Josh Matlow, and we did manage to speak with him today about why he decided to go against this motion. Really, have a listen to what he had to say.
Because it's a complete waste of time, and I'd rather focus on issues like flooding today, like cost of living, like cost of housing. There are people in the city who are asking us to focus our energy and our time at council on our priorities, and I'm just not interested in trying to be cool with the Swifties. Not that I ever could anyway.
So Councillor Matlow did acknowledge that he is also a Swiftie. He's a Taylor Swift fan, but he, of course, as you heard, thinks that there's more important things to talk about. A lot of different important things are being discussed here at City Council. Lina and Bakari, this is the last council meeting before summer break, and we know that they've actually just moved a motion to extend it because there's still things to talk about, so it will be extended until at least 8 p.m. tonight. Back to you.
Okay, CP24's Lindsay Biscaya live at City Hall. Thanks. A new report is raising red flags about the Toronto condo market for investors.
The report by CIBC and Urban Nation says the local market is facing the biggest test in decades. It says ownership costs have soared by nearly 60% since 2020, far outpacing the increase in rents. So far this year, 82% of newly completed condos with a mortgage are cash flow negative, up from 52% 2 years ago. The report also warns dramatically slowing sales and condo completions will create a stagnation in housing stock in the years to come.
It's 5:48, 24 degrees. This is 5 at 5. And coming up, paying up for a bread price fixing scheme. How much it's going to cost a major grocery chain.
Just want to make sure. Hi there. Hi, Ian. It's Lena and Bakari from CP24. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Ian.
My pleasure. Hi,
Appreciate
how are you?
this. We'll be with you soon. Really interesting story. Can't wait to get your thoughts.
It is. It is. Very interesting.
Okay, talk soon.
Well, Loblaws and George Weston Limited have agreed to pay hundreds of millions more to settle lawsuits related to the bread price fixing scheme. The two companies will have to pay a total of $500 million, $96 million of which has already been paid via $25 gift cards. That was in 2018. The class action lawsuits were settled by a mediator, and the bread price fixing arrangement, that happened between 2001 and 2015. That's when it was reported by Loblaws to the Competition Bureau in exchange for immunity from criminal charges. The company publicly admitted to the scandal in 2017.
And for a closer look at what's being described as the largest antitrust settlement in Canadian history, we turn to Ian Lee, an associate professor at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Thanks so much for making time for CP24 Live at 5 here. Many of us will remember those $25 gift cards when the scandal broke. Where is this money going to go? Is it going to go in the pocket of the consumer?
Probably. And this is very unusual. I mean, well, this has happened frequently in the States of the last 10, 20, 30 years. Frequently, there are class actions against companies because of certain nefarious behavior that was typically involving overpricing. And so a very enterprising law firm would go after them and get a very large settlements, whether it was pharmaceuticals or manufactured goods and so forth. We don't have that same history in Canada, although that may be changing. But to your direct point, unlike other more complex products, let's say an automobile that's defective, maybe defective airbags or something, it's a big ticket item. So it's much easier to identify the person who was harmed or wronged. Whereas food is something, and bread is something we buy. It's very small value purchases. And so we don't track them with the same way, not to trivialize the price fixing whatsoever. I'm simply saying that they don't have a registration system, unlike automobiles, for example, or consumer electronics goods, where they can say, Ian Lee bought 2 loaves of bread on January the 13th, 2017. So what they'll probably do is go to something similar to the cards, the rebate cards or the gift cards, and rely on the honor system. and to say, if you felt you bought bread and you were ripped off, well, come on in and we'll give you some gift cards.
Okay, so what does this mean for the future of grocery shoppers? And, could we see any effects or changes to other industries?
I do believe this, and Bakari, I think that's an excellent question you've asked, and that's my interest. I'm not a lawyer, but I teach strategy, and strategy is about the behavior of companies. And when something like this comes along, I mean, this is the absolute last thing that any CEO ever wants to see is journalists like you talking about this on the evening news. This is called very, very, very bad branding. And so that's why I think Loblaws settled, by the way. They want to get this story off the news. They want to get it out of sight, resolve it, and say, look, we fessed up, we addressed the problem, we're compensating consumers. But I think that this is going to set a precedent. It's to other companies across all industries. Don't go down this road. Price fixing is, first off, it's criminal under the Criminal Code of Canada, and we didn't even talk about that. I mean, and the Competition Bureau's ongoing investigation into criminal price fixing. But then there's the civilian side where you may be hit with a class action suit that will cost you a huge amount of money.
I want to talk more about the timing here and why Loblaw may have settled, because you just talked about some of the reasons. It might also be because, some people in our country are boycotting the company. This comes as Canadians are really frustrated with sky-high grocery prices. What do you think this does to Loblaw and the industry at large from a reputational standpoint, Ian?
I think that's exactly right. And I'm not suggesting it's a PR stunt. I'm simply saying that they realize that the story's not going away until they address it. Kicking it down the road or trying to, push it under the carpet doesn't work. And this has been shown in crisis management study after crisis management study. The company that gets to the front, goes out to the microphones and says, look, we messed up, we screwed up, we're sorry. And by the way, here's the money to compensate you, are going to generate goodwill. And it will get the story off the news cycle, and then they can move forward. And yes, I do think that because they've been criticized, this industry has been criticized so extensively in the last year and a half, they're looking at ways to resolve the bad publicity, and especially the price fixing story, by doing this, and to resolve it so they can say, look, we've addressed it. And that issue is no longer an important story to talk about.
All right, the basis for a new case study. Ian Lee, Associate Professor at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much. It's 5:56 now, 24 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
Well, coming up, Toronto Police, they helped get the festivities for Caribbean Carnival started.
Toronto police helped kick off Caribbean Carnival festivities in the East End today. The police chief was front and center at Eastwood Neighborhood Community Center for the 33rd annual kickoff celebration and children's parade. What a big party.
It's 5:59, 24 degrees. This is Toronto's breaking news.